Hello, my name is Francesca Hong, and I'm running for State Assembly District 76. I'm a mom, I'm a service industry worker, and a community organizer. And my campaign is one that is centers on equity and community care with an emphasis on preserving our shared humanity.
Awesome, thank you very much. My name is Peter German, he, him, his. I'm co-chair of the Dane County chapter of Our Wisconsin Revolution. Then Ron.
I'm Ron Rosenberry Chase. I'm a member of the steering committee for the Dane County chapter and the treasurer for the Dane County chapter of Our Wisconsin Revolution.
Thank you all very much for being here today. Hope you all had a good night's sleep last night after all the fireworks. So we'll just kick it off right here with number one. So do you support publicly funded elections? Why or why not?
Absolutely. I think in conjunction with some new campaign finance laws, we can achieve where more people are accounted for. I believe that with publicly funded elections, that we will have more inclusivity and fairness in the election process, where one is not so dependent on and biased towards the incumbent, as well as gives candidates more time to engage with the people as opposed to having to focus on fundraising on a constant basis.
Thank you. Ron, you can ask next.
Do you favor extending the time frame to vote at the polls during the elections to a minimum of 2 weeks ahead of the election date?
Yes, absolutely. I believe we need more time at the polls. I believe we need to make Election Day a national holiday. There are unfair access, there are access barriers to many folks in the state where voting does not come as easily, and it is to no fault of their own. So it's giving that extra time frame will allow for more people, especially working class and people of color, to make sure their voices are heard.
Thank you very much. And then while we're on the topic of elections, obviously Wisconsin, the state that's very much affected by gerrymandering, especially the assembly. So what model or plan would you prefer for redistricting?
I support the Iowa model. I'll definitely push towards nonpartisan drawing of districts with a nonpartisan committee that draws the maps. We need to take a more aggressive stance on some of the voter ID laws, repeal Act 23, and work towards maps that are transparent and have metrics with public input.
Thank you very much.
All right. Turning to your particular views, what are your top 3 legislative priorities, and what will you do to move them through the legislature?
So my first priority is achieving racial and equity that I believe can be done through just economic justice. And so equity is, I know, a relatively large policy grouping, but I believe we can help more people when we put economic justice at the forefront. And when I'm talking about economic justice, I'm talking about a fair 15 wage, which we can achieve by putting more control into both local and county municipalities to implement fair living wages for all people. Having a higher minimum wage at a fair 15 is going to allow for much more, allow people to have purchasing control, take charge of being agents of their own change in accumulating wealth in their communities that have been marginalized, as well as actually help small businesses as well. And so I think economic development done through a lens of economic justice is my first priority. Second is education. Access to public education, high quality public education is the foundation of a good democracy. And right now in Wisconsin, the problem we have is a tension between what is valued at a local and a county level versus what is given as a framework from a state level due to harmful acts like Act 10, what's being done in terms of austerity measures, not prioritizing our students and teachers. So I'll be working towards achieving more education fairness and look at what bringing more funding into local and county municipalities to fund public education. And lastly, in order to enact all of this, we do need to expand our democratic outreach. And I believe that we need to be engaging voters who have been marginalized, who are not engaged as much. And in order to fight in the legislature, we need to make more of our seats and more of our voices heard. I'm in a unique position as a person of color, as a small business owner, and one humanist who can really start connecting with people and getting them engaged across the state by helping them find mutual benefits that our state can really provide, regardless of what side of the aisle you on. Mutual benefits are human rights like access to affordable housing, access to clean water, access to fair wages, high quality public education. These are not partisan issues. These are human issues. And I believe that working across to make sure that we engage voters on these issues can help us win back some of those seats in our state.
Thank you very much. And then sort of a little bit of a different thread. In the emergence of from the pandemic, obviously a lot of people are hurting. Would you support a state-level economic hardship payment? And then do you support direct payments to residents? And then what do you think should be the components in such a bill?
Absolutely. So like I said, in conjunction with the Fair 15 wage, we need to be providing universal income to all Wisconsinites at a level of $2,000 a month. In our district, especially in the city of Madison, over 50% of our residents are becoming rent cost burdened. And so they're spending over 40% of their income on rent and unable to pay, and many folks are out of work. So a universal income at $2,000 a month should be the bare minimum that our government should be providing for residents, as this pandemic is going to continue to devastate the economy, devastate lives, and devastate livelihoods. We see numbers coming back right now of folks going back to work, but what's happening is that doesn't account for folks going back to work, do not have the original hours they had. As a business owner, I don't have the hours always to give to my employees because obviously our revenue is down. So we need the government to step in to make sure that workers are being taken care of, so that when we want to start going back into an economic recovery, we have our workers taken care of first, which is the foundation of the building blocks of an economy is taking care of our workers.
Thank you.
How will you guarantee housing to citizens? And how will you deal with the financial situation, part of which you just mentioned, of those facing eviction because of the pandemic? Go ahead.
So we definitely need to put back in the eviction moratorium, and we need legislators in the state government that are not landlords. One of the things I think we can implement right away is really looking at housing development and make sure that it's happening in amenity-rich areas, and that any sort of development has to happen with the incentive of putting in affordable housing. And to be honest, we are going to be looking at some of these developments losing tenants and losing commercial tenants. And so we need to think about how can we incentivize some of these buildings to house more of our homeless, to look at how do we provide to reutilize some of these spaces to not only house people, but maybe become job training grounds for people. Our city in Madison have only put in 1,000 affordable housing units since 2014, and that number is unacceptable. And so the focus has to be incentivizing some of these developers and reutilizing some of the empty spaces that will no doubtably come about and come available following this or during this pandemic.
Thank you. And then in addition to housing, another thing a lot of people are facing during the pandemic, especially with the loss of their jobs, is loss of access to healthcare. So the question is, will you fight for a single-payer healthcare system at the state level? And would you support a federal single-payer healthcare system?
Absolutely, I would support the expansion of a single-payer system at a state and federal level. Right now with Badger Care Plus, we need to be looking at increasing the availability of that program to more citizens. And we can do that by making sure that we raise the income of 200% of the income limit, of 200% above the federal poverty level as an income limit for Badger Care, and make sure that when we are given the option of expanding Medicaid, that we take those federal dollars and put it towards helping those who have lost health care or need to apply due to loss of job.
Thank you.
Okay. Let's see, you kind of addressed some of these in your previous answers. On workers' rights, would you work to pass workers' rights laws helping those who are forced to return to work but who risk infection from the pandemic? Absent the equivalent of a single payer system, will you push the state to guarantee their medical coverage through Badger Care?
Absolutely. The state needs to guarantee that those who have lost their health insurance through no fault of their own in the pandemic need to be guaranteed health care through Badger Care. In terms of labor rights, I think that we need to really look at setting better metrics for some small businesses and implementing labor contracts, which is something that most people can small businesses, regardless of their size, are able to implement and should be required to implement. I think the way that we can incentivize businesses to do so really is to set these metrics and standards in a very public way that allows the people to see where their dollars are going. And to know that there's businesses with more of a social and political conscience. And I think that this is a way to kind of creatively make sure that businesses are held accountable for protecting their workers. And then there needs to be subsidies and tax relief for the businesses that do that. If you incentivize those businesses to put in better metrics and better protections for their workers, we can actually have the laborers start more communications with their employers. I've done this myself in my restaurant where we've implemented a Fair 15 across the board. And this is for regardless if you're a tipped worker or if you're a kitchen worker. We've had newly signed labor contracts that guaranteed paid sick leave and paid time off, and a COVID-19 plan if someone comes in and they are infected. And these are the bare requirements that the state should be implementing. But right now what's happening is they're just guidelines. And guidelines are not something that people can enforce. And so you're going to have a lot of businesses and companies trying to work around this just to try to make their ends meet, because COVID-19 has really crushed their revenue streams as well. So there needs to be stricter restrictions. There needs to be incentives for businesses to make the right decision, and for laborers really to be able to be in control at this time. I do believe that incentivizing unions, I would love if the service industry could unionize as well, should be a campaign that the state should be pushing for.
Thank you very much. All right, so the next one is kind of like a little bit of a lightning round. So I'm just gonna list off proposals, and then you can indicate whether you support them or not. And if you'd like, give a little bit of info, but just yes or no is all it's necessary on these. All right, so do you support the propositions outlined in Campaign Zero, which includes ending broken windows policing?
Yes.
More community oversight of the police?
Yes.
Limiting the use of force?
Yes.
Independent investigation and prosecution of officers?
Yes.
Community representation in those kinds of investigations?
Yes.
More body cams and filming the police?
Yes.
Increased training for officers?
Yes.
Ending for-profit policing?
Yes.
And then demilitarization?
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you very much.
Okay, this kind of continues with our with Peter's lightning round. In addition, respond to the following. A, I will support let's see, increasing, leveling, decreasing, or eliminating funding for the police?
Eliminating.
A police officer in your jurisdiction has been filmed killing someone. They have stopped or arrested. How would you respond?
The police officer would need to be charged and arrested from the district attorney, and then viewing pending civilian oversight review board. I know that that is a process that Madison is working on forming now. I would actually advocate for a restorative justice process following the arrest of the officer.
Are there any other propositions regarding policing that you would fight for?
I think abolishing policing is one segment of reforming and reevaluating our criminal justice system. Using those funds from using the funds after we've eliminated the access to eliminating funds for the police needs to be put into rehabilitation services, mental health services for those in prison, making sure that we are looking at decreasing our prison populations, increasing funds towards community oversight committees, and making sure that we're investing some of that money also in public education. So I think right now, if eliminating the police budget is not on the table, divesting and reinvesting into community control is what I would push for.
Awesome, thank you very much. The next one sort of goes into a little bit more of a personal history style question. So who did you support in the Democratic Party presidential primary this year, and why?
My heart was with Bernie, but I voted for Elizabeth Warren. I believe that we need a woman in office, or self-identifying woman in office at this time. I believe that she has the plan and really a lot of the policies and the protocols to be able to help shift some of the ideologies and the mindsets that we have in Congress and along in our current political institutions. I believe that we need more stronger, I won't say radical, because I believe what we're fighting for is not radical, but I believe that in order to get some of those larger changes pushed across, that she had the best platform to help move and be supported from Congress to implement some of these policies.
Thank you.
Okay. What's your analysis of the Evers administration's handling of the COVID-19 crisis in Wisconsin, including his handling of the process leading up to the election? And what do you think of the legislature's response to that?
I believe Governor Evers did everything in his personal power to provide a more swift response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Unfortunately, the GOP leaders and Speaker Voss and Fitzgerald decided to stay idle for over 75 days. They lost out $25 million that we could have provided for those who were seeking unemployment insurance by waiving the 1-week waiting fee that the federal government provided. They have pushed for their courts to then really take away a lot of the plans that Governor Evers wanted to put into place. And what that has done is really pushed us into a regression, both economically, both in a public health standpoint, from a social standpoint. We are going to be in a long-term recovery process from COVID-19. And unfortunately, right now, the consensus that I am getting from a lot of small business owners, from community community leaders, from nonprofit leaders who I've spoken into my district, they are feeling very much like everyone is on their own. And this cannot be the message that we get from our government. We are in a position where we can uniquely use our different resources and work collaboratively towards achieving more a safer and more equitable society right now. And I'm talking about the ways that nonprofit and grassroots community have come together to try to serve their communities. We are in a position where I believe that the private sector can actually help those causes as well, and the government needs to step in and supplement. So overall, I believe that Wisconsin is really in a dangerous place in terms of handling the crisis, and I hope to see with the incoming numbers, our legislatures get back into session and start passing better plans and regulations, so folks, because now there's really no excuse. We see where a lot of the cases are. We see where the need is. We see where some of these resources can go. When the pandemic first started, we didn't see, because we didn't have the testing, we couldn't see where a lot of the issues were. Now that we can identify the problems, it's up to the legislature and the executive branch to really start implementing resources where they're needed most and try to contain the pandemic. The longer that pandemic goes on, the worse our economic recovery is going to be. We're already seeing signs of a recession. We cannot digress any further, so swift action is needed.
Thank you very much. Next, we'll be sort of moving on to a little bit more of, well, I suppose only like the technical foreign policy question on the sheet, but are you supportive of the BDS, which is the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement?
I am supportive.
Awesome.
Do you believe that protesting is a form of speech and therefore the right to do so, including the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement and anti-pipeline movement, should not be punished?
I believe protests are not only a form of speech, but a form of patriotism.
Hell yeah. Awesome. So then let's see, next will be like a few more of technical questions about the campaign.
Okay.
So list unions that have already endorsed you in this race, and which labor endorsements are you actively seeking?
I have not received any endorsements from unions. I did interviews with SEIU and the building trades.
Awesome.
Regarding fundraising, how much have you raised for this race up to date? Who are your top 3 donors, and what percentage of your total is from these top donors? How much of it is strictly in small individual donations of less than $50?
So to the date, I've raised $22,500. The largest donors are Jin Cook Hong, Nicole Schmies, and Mark Griffin, and believe they're between $800 and $900 for those 3. We have over 450 donors, and the average donation is $50. We have raised $1,525 with the 233 campaign. So 233 is the minimum wage for tipped workers, and I aim to bring that up to $15 an hour. So our campaign of folks donating $2.33 raised up to $1,500.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Also, is this a vase just got tipped over. Sorry about that. Sorry. Is this your first election, by the way?
Pardon?
Or is this your first election, or have you run?
Yes.
Campaign before?
No, I have
Awesome.
never run for office before.
Hell yeah. Cool.
No, yeah.
Yeah. And then the next question would be, so do you support legalization of recreational cannabis, including the expungement of all previous cannabis-related charges, and release of all those currently serving time for such charges. I'm going to quick, yeah, awesome. Yeah.
Yes. Absolutely. The state is going to be facing a $2 billion budget shortfall, and I do not support measures to cut funding or austerity measures. I do believe we will need to start taxing heavily on capital gains and those who qualify and apply a wealth tax. And in conjunction with that, we need to seriously consider and push for cannabis reform as a form of new revenue for the state, as it was going to, like I said, be seeing serious budget shortfalls with this upcoming year due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And a simple, no-brainer solution is to legalize marijuana use.
Awesome.
Excellent. Do you have any paid staff or consultants working on your campaign? What percentage of your campaign funding goes to paid staff and consultants?
I have one paid staff, my brilliant campaign manager, Pachia Vang, who is also a campaign manager rookie, as I am a campaign candidate rookie, and she receives $3,500 a month. So to date, that will be a little bit, about 30% of our costs.
Okay.
Awesome. Well, that just about wraps it up. Thank you so much for coming on here with us and answering our questions.
Peter, Ron, thank you so much for having me. It was really great speaking with you both, and thank you for the work that you're doing as well.
Hell yeah.